So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with Dr. Ryan C. Warner. And Ryan is, and I'm going to read it, consulting psychologist and founder and CEO of RC Warner Consulting. Ryan is participating in our podcast that we're on Lessons in Leadership, so the journey. And what I love about it, you and I connected on LinkedIn. I've had the opportunity to listen to you and hear your story in a couple different venues, and it's going to be through podcast. So I've enjoyed getting to know you, and I'm excited for our audience to get to know you as well. So welcome. I'm
Thank
going
you.
to kick us off. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to kick us off with a quote. You've got the book behind you, Start with Why. So that's where we're going to start off. And I know you've got another quote that resonates with you and helps guide you. This one stood out for me as a person with a why can overcome any how. And when I think about that, I have to think internally. And so I think all of us, when we hear quotes, words, that are out there, it's like, okay, what does this mean to me? Does this make me pause? And this one made me pause on the why and being able to overcome anyhow for me personally is that when I was clear on my why, which is helping people, I was able to get clear on what I wasn't.
Mm.
And I think up until that point, I was kind of in this space of kind of being everything to everyone. And so for me, that's where why pulls in. And then the how part is a matter of just visualizing, yes, this can be true,
Yeah, definitely.
so we can overcome it. So Ryan, welcome to the conversation. And what are your thoughts around? I want to hear about your leadership journey and some of the standouts for you.
Mhm. So yeah, I really like that quote because that my why fuels everything that I do. It gets me up every day. It helps me push through challenging circumstances that naturally come, within business and the work that I do. But ultimately, my why is to assist leaders and assist teams with helping create a culture of wellness and inclusion to maximize their potential. So as a clinically trained psychologist, I'm an expert when it comes to human behavior and mental health and wellness. And I know how pivotal that is, to help us feel that we are doing something in life, something that we're contributing to. When we go to work every single day and feel that we're engaged, and that improves our mental health and improves our mental well-being. And also when we feel included and we feel like we belong in the workplace, that enhances our overall health as well, right? So my goal is to go into workplaces, work with leaders, and help them create that culture that values inclusion and values wellness, so that all individuals can thrive.
You know
Uh,
what you say that, and what comes to mind for me, and I wrote down, is that people know that they matter.
mhm.
It's like if I'm going to go someplace and I matter, I make a difference, I'm all in. I mean, I'm going to show up, I'm going to be engaged. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yes, definitely. And then when I'm engaged, I'm going to feel better about myself. I'm going to enhance my confidence. I'm going to enhance my self-efficacy, right? I'm going to be more motivated, right? And in turn, I'm going to have overall improved wellness.
I love that. So
Mhm.
when you look back on your journey, what standouts are for you? Maybe things that you're like, wow, that was really pivotal in my life. Quotes, we kicked off with a quote that matter to you. Um, Things that if you look back, maybe you would have done things a little bit differently.
Mm. Yeah, so I could talk about my journey. So during my undergrad experience, I began seeking a bachelor's degree in community health. And I knew that I was interested in health because in high school, I loved sports. I played every sport you can imagine, from basketball to football to I ran cross country, ran track, and I knew I wanted to engage in something health related. So I chose community health as more of like a generalized type of degree. And during that experience, I served as a part-time physical therapist technician when I sought my bachelor's degree. And my job was to work under the supervision of a physical therapist, and I helped individuals rehabilitate when it comes to the physical state. So if they broke their arm or broke their leg or had mobility issues, I would help them do the various exercises, right, and help them get back to optimal function. And during that time, a lot of my clients, they would tell me their biggest secrets. They would tell me their biggest struggles, and what they were going through. They were saying, hey, me breaking my leg, that led to me feeling kind of down and me feeling kind of depressed. And I wasn't able to do things that I enjoyed, right? And I would just listen to them. I would validate them. I would empathize with them. And in turn, after they were able to get better physically, they would say, Ryan, I really appreciate you just being a listening ear. And that helped me, just get through this difficult circumstance. And I began to get this feedback from a lot of my clients. And somebody recommended me they were like, hey, you should keep going with your education and maybe be a psychologist because you're a great listener. You're great with giving advice, practical advice, right?
Yeah.
And right then and there, I was like, hey, maybe I should be a psychologist. Maybe I should keep going with my education, right? In turn, yeah, I saw the master's degree and then the PhD, and fast forward, now I'm here.
It's so interesting how someone planting seeds, right, that grew and you're like, that feels right. That,
Yeah.
yeah, because what you just described in a relatively short period of time, I went to my master's and I got my PhD. That is a ton of freaking work. So it was a seed with deep roots
Mhm.
that planted. I love it.
Yeah.
Uh, so how about you? As far as you guiding forward, what does that look like for you after you got your PhD?
Mhm. So, well, let me back up and talk about during my doctoral level experience because that really fueled where I'm at now. During that time, I became even more passionate about racial justice and equality and belongingness, especially within college campuses. So I did a lot of outreach in the community. I did speaking engagements. And during this time, it was mostly just volunteer. My dissertation was on microaggressions among African American college students. And
Oh,
microaggressions, which are these subtle, covert forms of discrimination directed towards marginalized groups. And they happen so subtly, sometimes you don't even recognize that they're happening, right? So
right.
telling a black man, oh, you speak so well. And maybe you want to give that feedback to someone who's white, right? Or going up to a woman and saying, oh, I can't believe that you're at this leadership role, expecting that they wouldn't be like the CEO of a large organization, right? So those like subtle type of, remarks and behaviors have a significant impact on the well-being of others, right? So I became really passionate about that topic. I started to do research on it and speaking engagements. And in turn, that motivated me to continue that work after I graduated. And then ultimately fueled my why of promoting wellness and inclusion within workplaces. So, yeah, that experience right there then led to me doing a lot of this work within the military. I was a
Yeah.
military psychologist right after I graduated. And it was my job to promote wellness and inclusion within the military base that I worked at. Yeah, I did a lot of that work and also a lot of work within the community. And in turn, I began to think about, hey, maybe I should open my own consulting business and maybe I should do this full time, right? Because this is something that really gets me out of bed
Yeah.
and, ignites my passion, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so fast forward again now, I'm doing this work full time in a full time capacity, working with organizations across the globe to
Mhm.
enhance wellness and inclusion so they can reach their optimal potential.
I love it. It's interesting because my brain went to timeline with military, is you went to the military after you went to college,
Hmm.
after you got your PhD.
Yes.
Um, and a lot of people don't do that. A lot of people, it's going to be earlier on in their career, the military helps with that. What is the moment when you look back on that? Because I have pride for what you just described. What is the moment for you that just stands out that like this is one of my more defining moments that I'm just like super proud of and that can't believe that I was a part of this?
Yeah, great question. I can remember when I was seeking my doctoral level degree. I went to a very prestigious university, and I noticed that there weren't a lot of groups that supported men of color on that campus. It was a predominantly white institution, and there are very few men of color, at the graduate level. And so what I did is I started up a group called Men to Men. It was a group that was taking place a couple years ago before I got there, and I restarted the group. I got funding for it, and ultimately the goal was for men of color to come around in a circle together, and eat pizza, eat food, and just engage in some camaraderie, right? In turn, that we can support each other, right? And we learned from each other's experiences. We were able to support each other with being, these few, men of color, at this university. And there was a time in which at first it began with just men, and
Mhm.
then women of color started to engage in the group. And they were like, hey, we really want this as well. This is really useful. And we feel validated. We feel that, we're not alone on this campus, right? So then it grew to a very large group. And during one of our monthly meetings, there was a group of Asian Americans in the group, and they began, crying. They began, being very emotional, talking about their experience. And I just saw others hug them, and and just bring them in and say, "Hey, you're not alone." And right then and there, I began to tear up, and I recognized, wow, this is actually making a difference, on this campus. Uh,
Yeah.
right then and there, I was like, hey, I need to continue this work in an intentional way so that I can continue to make difference, not only on this campus, but within other communities across the globe. So,
What stands out for me, Ryan, is when you're talking is I think about both sides. I think about the impact of someone who feels like the outsider, right? To all the comments that you're making, little nuanced things. I've been in that position before. And I think back it was like fifth grade and then again in the eighth grade and then again in ninth grade because my father was in the military. And so we moved. And so when you're the newbie, you're the one on the outskirts. I think about the person who is feeling this way and things are being done. And I also think about the opportunity other people have to be very intentional about how we engage with people. To your point, the things that we say, and to own the things that we say, so that we're not unintentionally putting people in this space that can have them feel that way.
mhm.
Because I'm also a huge proponent for um, us being able to control our reaction to what people do. Because you've got people out there that just flat out don't care. I don't think it's the vast majority. I think the vast majority do. They're just unaware, I think, of the impact that they can have on someone else. So it's powerful. Um, it's powerful what you're doing, and I have to wonder the experience that you have then, how is it formed or informed what you do in your business now?
Great. So, with all the knowledge I have and the research that I've done, I utilize all that expertise to work with leaders so that they can create a more inclusive culture, a
Mhm.
culture that values the wellness of their employees, a culture that brings together individuals of all different backgrounds to accomplish a certain mission or goal, right? And I do that multifacetedly. So, number one, I look intrapersonally. I help leaders within executive coaching work that I do, group coaching, etc. Look within themselves. Hey, what are some biases that may cause some challenges or serve as a barrier when it comes to getting your organization to the next level, right? And motivating your teams. How can we look within yourself to challenge those biases, become more aware of them, and in turn, we can be better leaders and reach our optimal potential? The next thing I do is interpersonally. Okay. During our interactions with others, how can we also ensure that we're doing things that motivate others, that we're engaging in clear communication, that we're trying to, convey a message that we can get everybody on the same team, so that we can, reach these goals, right? And then also systemically, what are some systemic barriers that we need to, become more aware of, or what is going well within the organization that we can intentionally do to make the organization even better, right? Well, let's look at our policies, let's look at our procedures, let's look at our programs in place. So based on that multifaceted framework, I implement, that different perspective when it comes to executive coaching work, speaking engagements that I engage in as well, and just consulting projects to help organizations reach their ultimate potential.
What is, in your perspective, I love the intentionality, the framework, the different areas to work on. If you were to say to a leader listening, and it could be a leader of just themselves, it could be a leader with, people leader with direct reports, hands down, what is the one thing, if you do nothing else, what is the one thing that you should do?
approach and not avoid. We often avoid the hard stuff.
Hmm.
Okay. We avoid talking about certain topics that make people feel uncomfortable,
Hmm.
right? We don't talk about politics in the workplace or race or culture, right? Or those type of things, right? But in turn, that may lead certain groups to feel invalidated. That may lead certain groups to not feel like they belong in the workplace, right? So sometimes we need to approach difficult situations or conversations so that in turn we can come together, right? And support each other's strengths. So that's the one key of advice that I would give leaders. Because in my experience, um, not just leaders, but all human beings, we
Yeah.
love avoiding.
Yeah.
We love instant gratification and we love doing the easiest things first. Okay. But what about those difficult conversations or maybe that bias within your particular policy and employee handbook that maybe that we just don't want to approach right now because maybe it's too complicated, right? Or too quote unquote taboo, right? So those are those are the things that I help the leaders the best with, approaching and not avoiding to
Yeah.
this turn, get to that next level.
Yeah. I appreciate that because what came to mind for me is let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? It's so that people aren't dancing around it. The thing I would say, the caution that I would say is have someone be there as a thought partner for you. As you're- um, what you're referring to is how you help leaders do this. And when
Correct.
I think about it, we can have well-intentioned people that are now going to have this conversation. But if they don't have a soundboard,
Hmm.
uh, someone else that can say, that may not land as intended.
Hmm.
And to help guide an approach, I'm a huge advocate for reaching out and getting that before we just go all in.
Definitely. Yeah, and that's what I'm here for. That's
Yes.
I help close that gap, right? Because sometimes we have the best intentions, but we just don't know how to reach that goal, right?
Yeah.
So by no means am I saying, oh yeah, go try things and see what works, right? Sometimes we need that support. I don't
Yeah.
know about you, but if I'm trying to get in shape, sometimes I need to hire that personal trainer, right? To help me, So that's what I'm here for as a coach, right? As
Yeah.
a thought partner, right? I want to partner with those organizations, with those leaders to help
Yeah.
them close that gap and reach the next level.
Yeah. No, you and I, while I'm not focused directly on diversity, equity, and inclusion or diversity and inclusion, we both support leaders in a similar way. I just want to caution people, you know, um, check and make sure the thinking is sound, that, you've got other perspectives
Mhm.
on your approach and your thinking. There's a quote that you mentioned before we start. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah, because to follow up on that as well, yes, because if we only have one perspective, then that leads to bias, right? And we know bias has a significant impact on how we approach certain situations, how we interact with others, right, et cetera. So we need to bring in those diverse perspectives, right?
Yes.
Have those diverse employees that can, give you a different way to think about things, right? Or maybe you have that thought partner, right, that you can reach out to, right? So don't try to do this alone.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Yeah, and I have visuals that came to mind as you were talking about all that stuff different, but the value of perspectives is crazy. I had former colleague because I would do leadership development workshops and stuff for within an organization I worked at. And so I followed him. I did the coaching leadership, leader as a coach approach module. And so he did one around mindfulness and perspectives came up around productivity too. And he did this activity where he pointed his finger to the ceiling. Everyone pointed. You look at your hand, you start turning your finger clockwise. And then you slowly lower it, right? And then you lower it to your waist and you're still looking the whole time. Only nothing changed about what you did. But if you're looking down at your finger now, you don't have the same perspective. And
Hmm.
all of a sudden, this clockwise finger is now counterclockwise.
Hmm.
Nothing changed except your perspective. And so that to me was super impactful because I realize, I only know what I see, my perspective of what it is, but what else is happening?
Mhm. Yeah.
And there is so much power in that. Yeah. Um, Quote that you had, I loved it. can you bring it in to the conversation that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, so I feel it's only right. Today we're recording on Martin Luther King Day, right? So I want to give an MLK quote. And the quote is, whatever your life work is, do it well. And it's a simple quote, but it resonates with me so powerfully because oftentimes, I try to do so many different things, right? I have a lot of different passions, right? But that quote centers me and brings me back and say, okay, what is my life's work? What am I here for, right? What is the difference that I want to make? Okay. And whatever that is, right? I need to lean into that fully. I need to be intentional about it. And I need to do my job very well, right? Because um, uh, instead of doing 1,000 things at once, how can I just do one thing really good, right, to make that difference? Okay. So I often think about that when, I really want to get my hand in all these different pots and in turn that brings me back. I want to promote inclusion and wellness within organizations, right? And that centers me on that. And I focus all of my attention and energy into that passion to make a difference.
Yeah, I love it. I have to laugh. I'm sitting here as a bobblehead too, up and down, because I totally can relate to that. I have what I call swim lanes because my world came from process improvement too. And I've got a gazillion of them. And I do have to. My to-do list is a front and a back of all these things. So I do have to focus. So I appreciate that one. Ryan, I appreciate the time. You're a really cool human. And so thank you for what you're doing and your perspective on what you're doing. What are one or two things that you would love people listening to walk away with?
Mhm. So, yeah, I would just emphasize, that we should look at, what are the hard, quote unquote, hard things that we know we need to do, but maybe just don't know how to do. Okay. Because once you approach that and identify it, then, the how will come later, just like that quote you gave earlier,
Yeah,
right? So, approach, don't avoid.
yeah,
I just actually just want to leave listeners with that. And you can actually apply this in a lot of aspects of your life. Okay. What are some things that you're avoiding constantly? And we think about avoidance, it's not just a behavior. Hey, I don't want to have that hard conversation with that employee. It's maybe avoiding certain thoughts, right? Or avoiding certain emotions, right? So, what are some things that you are avoiding, either psychologically, emotionally, or behaviorally, that's causing an impact when it comes to your leadership abilities
mm,
and serving as a barrier with you getting to the next level, right?
yeah,
So, I just want leaders and also listeners just to reflect on that and come up with some type of action plan so that you can slowly approach, take those baby steps, so it's not too scary, right? But just helping you recognize that this is a journey, it's not a destination. Okay.
yeah.
If you can slowly take those steps each and every day to approach and not avoid, then you're gonna be better personally and professionally.
So you've triggered a couple things in my brain, so thank you for that. One of them is I did an emotional intelligence boot camp, shoot, probably 13 years ago. The bullet point, because I think about bullet points that I walked away with, is face your fears and do it anyway.
Mm,
And so it is similar to what you're talking about there. The other thing that comes to mind is when you're talking about what's getting in the way, is we all have limiting beliefs, right? These
yep.
beliefs that we've convinced ourselves are in fact true. I along the lines of what you were talking about is identifying what's stopping us from approaching and keeping us in the avoid section is identify those limiting beliefs, those things that you believe with absolute certainty are true, and then challenge them.
Mhm.
And I think that's the step that's going to help blow up, unpack whatever to be able to get us moving forward into that space because that is the stuff that holds us back.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, so I don't have enough experience to be in this leadership role,
yeah,
or I'm not smart enough, right? Or person X knows more than me, and maybe they should have this position, right? So all of these, yeah, limiting beliefs come up for all of us, and I'm sure that everyone listening to this can relate to that, at some
yeah,
point in their lives, right? So yeah, looking at what's the evidence, what's the fact, okay, and how do those facts challenge those beliefs? And
yeah.
fact, yeah, we also often have to remember that feelings are not facts. Okay.
Mm,
So you may feel a certain way, right? But those feelings may come and go. Let's look at
yeah.
the facts. So those may stay, more constant.
Yeah. No, I agree. Thank you. We could probably spend a long time in a room together. I just have a feeling. I could listen to you for a while and go back and forth, and then you would trigger different things in my head. Again, I appreciate the time. This has been Leadership Soundbites. Please like, share, subscribe. If you want to be on the podcast, let me know. If there's a topic that you want to hear about, message me. Until next time, thank you. And thank you, Ryan C. Warner, Dr. Ryan C. Warner. Thank you.
Thanks.